All right, guys, this is our last lesson in Japan. We have a test this week. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but let's get started. We're going to look at samurai and shogun in feudal Japan. And remember, where have you heard feudal before? Remember, we talked about feudal Europe. Um, hint, hint, your assessment's going to be comparing feudal Europe to feudal Japan. So we'll see how those two compare. Let's set up your tree maps for your notes. You can use Cornell notes if you want to. Our vocabulary today is daimyo, samurai, bushido, shogun, and the Tokugawa shogunate. Go ahead and pause. Then you can write this down. All right, so as we get started in this final lesson of Japan, we'll be covering the military government of Japan. Check out the video on the next slide. This video I'm making right now will be on the next slide before you go through the slides. You have an assessment this week. You will have to write a paragraph. We're going to check on how well you're doing your paragraphs. At the end of the semester, we're going to test you one more time, and hopefully we're all doing really well. So this is kind of your last checkup before then. There will be some stuff coming out on Google Classroom today to help you get it set up. You'll see the prompt and everything. You can start setting that up today and tomorrow and be ready to start writing that on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on when you have class. And that's when that assessment will start. You'll have a paragraph to write, and then you have some vocabulary that you're going to have to answer questions about, and that's it. You'll start it on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on what day you have class, and then you have until 3 o'clock on Friday to finish. So again, these are the vocabulary words for today. We're going to include all of the Japan vocabulary words and maybe throw in a couple more from throughout the unit. All right, first of all, let's look at what a daimyo is. A daimyo is a large land owner. It's somebody who owns, in Japan, owns a lot of land. We talked about at the end of our last Heian Kyo lesson that there was some instability, and these large landowners started actually having more power than the emperor and were fighting with each other. Um, the government couldn't really control these owners, and they started fighting with each other. And it started a period, just like in China, just like in Europe, of chaos and fighting between these large landowners. These large landowners, in order to help protect themselves, they hired, or they had people called, didn't really hire, they had people called samurai who we're going to talk about. And the samurai protected the daimyo, and they fought for the daimyo, and they pledged their loyalty to the daimyo in return for land and a place to live. So there's one of our first ding, ding, ding similarities between knights and samurai. Knights fought for a lord in return for a place to live and land. Samurai fought for a daimyo in return for land and a place to live. So daimyo, a large land owner, kind of like a lord was. A lord would have a manor in medieval Europe. A daimyo would own a large piece of land in Japan. Next, we have our samurai, and I talked about them a little bit. You guys can go through and watch these videos. They're pretty short and they're really interesting. So go ahead and watch these videos on your own. But a samurai is a member of a powerful military caste in feudal Japan. And the samurai fought with honor. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The samurai were loyal to their daimyo, or to their lords, just like the knights were loyal to their lords. And by the way, this is happening relatively at the same exact time in Japan and in Europe, even though they have no contact with each other and have even no idea that they really exist in Japan and Europe. But the same system has come about, again, because of the chaos and fighting. So samurai were warriors that fought for a daimyo to protect that landowner. Vassal is, we didn't talk about this when we talked about Europe, but we'll talk about it now. A vassal is somebody who pledges their loyalty in return for land or something like that. So a vassal is a samurai would be a vassal because they're pledging their loyalty to the daimyo in return for their protection. A knight is a vassal because they pledge their loyalty and service in return for a place to live at the Lord's manor. As I said, the samurai fight with a code, a code of ethics, a code of loyalty. It's called the Bushido Code. Again, a little video you can watch here, but it's very similar to chivalry, where they need to do things with honor. They can't dishonor themselves. They can't dishonor their daimyo. They they have rituals that they go through. Remember the samurai we talked about before follow Zen Buddhism, so they use that as for their mental state. They also, their fights in battle were fought with honor. Things weren't things weren't done ruthlessly, so to speak. They were done with a certain code of how things had to be done, and the way they lived their life, being polite and things like that, was things were very similar to chivalry. Then we have someone called a shogun, and what the shogun one was the most powerful daimyo. So we have different daimyo who were in charge of their empire or their land, but the most powerful of all of those daimyo then became the shogun. And the shogun was a person who really ran Japan. There was still an emperor, but we talked about this, a figurehead. The emperor was a figurehead, didn't really have any power. The shogun, the most powerful daimyo, was really in charge of Japan. Let's look at the feudal system. It's going to look a lot similar to the feudal system that we talked about in Europe. It is shaped still like a pyramid. We have merchants, peasants, and artisans, shogun and daimyo, emperor, and the samurai. And let's see how they all fit. So first of all, the emperor was at the top, but they were really only a figurehead. The most powerful were the shogun, or the most powerful daimyo. Then underneath that, we have the samurai. Um, then below that, we have peasants and artisans, and this is a little bit different. We have merchants. Merchants were not looked upon as people that were really respected, because they weren't really doing anything. They were just buying and selling stuff. So merchants were actually the lowest class, below peasants and below the artisans. This is really similar, besides that last part, to feudal Europe. You had the king in charge, except the king was really in charge and wasn't a figurehead. But still, if we're comparing the two, we have the king in charge, and then underneath the king we had lords, which the lords here in Japan were called daimyo, and then underneath that we had the knights, or in this case the samurai, same thing, and at the bottom we have the peasants, the serfs. Some more information about that, go ahead and read through this slide after you watch the video. Finally, we have three powerful shogun coming up to control Japan. We have Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. Tokugawa Ieyasu is looked at probably as one of the most, if not the most powerful shogun, and started along what's called, instead of an empire, it's called a shogunate. And on each of these, watch these quick videos. There's a little bit of reading to do on here. So watch the videos and do your quick reading for some extra notes. Now, here's a hint for your writing prompt. Again, your writing prompt for this week is going to be comparing feudalism in Japan and Europe. And what are the similarities that we see, especially between knights and samurai? So let's look at some of those similarities and some differences. So samurai lived in Japan. Knights fought with armor, iron armor, even though the samurai did have armor, but it was not made out of iron. If you watch the videos, it's made out of everything from bamboo to leather to different materials. So the armor was different. And then the knights lived in Europe. The samurai had steel swords, where the knights generally had iron swords. And again, I just talked about that. There were leather plates for armor in Japan. The samurai used shields. The samurai used bows and arrows. Again, the knights lived in Europe. The samurai were willing to commit suicide if they were dishonored. So if they did anything that dishonored their lord or themselves, they were willing to actually kill themselves if they were dishonored. The knights would use crossbows. Later on, they used longbows and things like that. They both rode horses. They both used swords. They both wore armor, even though it was different kinds of armor. They both had codes of honor. So there was the bushido code for the samurai. There was the code of chivalry for the knights. They both served a lord, and they both gained service land for their service. And some of those things on the outside could be similar too, but there are more things that are similar between these two. And that's it for this part of the lesson. Again, I want you to go back through the slides. I just went through this quickly so you don't have to sit in front of the video for a long time. But there's a lot of stuff in here. Go back and read through it. And when you're done, there is a link right here to flashcards for the vocabulary for Japan. But again, we're going to sprinkle in some other vocabulary and questions from the rest of the unit. And this test, like I said, we're going to start it on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on what time you have class with us. You could actually start it early because we're going to push stuff out Monday and Tuesday this week. You can start the writing process if you'd like. So it's ready to go before you come in, but you don't have to. And then you have until 3 o'clock on Friday to finish. And then you get a week off. We decided to give you the week off because we're good people. All right, that's it. Take your notes, get it done.